Ian Murray, congratulations on becoming Secretary of State for Scotland. I want to talk to you about your role, but before I do, your upbringing, you've talked about having a really happy childhood, but growing up in an area that had a lot of challenges, some tough estates in the part of Edinburgh where you grew up. Now your office looks over Horse Guards Parade. What does that feel like?
It's a bit numb, to be honest. It's a great privilege to be in government. It's a great privilege to work in the Scotland office, and it's a great privilege to work with the wonderful people that are in this building. I have had to pinch myself several times. I think I've got a bruised arm pinching myself to just understand what all this means, and it's a great privilege to do it. But, you know, the job's huge, the responsibility's big, and as the Prime Minister said to us on Saturday morning at our first Cabinet meeting, we've dropped the word shadow from our titles, but now we have to deliver, and that's the key thing we're going to have to do. But I think I've said before during my deputy leadership campaign that people from where I'm brought up are more likely statistically to be in prison than be in Parliament, and even more so in government. So it's a great privilege to be here and to do this job, and we're looking forward to it.
And you'll have family, no doubt, watching as you're sworn in?
Absolutely. Sworn in for the 5th time, which I'm looking forward to doing later on this afternoon, which is going to be a great privilege again. And just to be, you know, to look at the new MPs that are coming in and thinking back to 2010 when I first swore in it's a great thing to do in life, and actually very few people can do it, and it's a great, great privilege to represent your constituency in Parliament, and to be in government is even greater.
The Labour slogan at this election was change. How are you going to approach your job, and how are you going to do it differently from how it's been done before?
Well, it's a number of things to that. There is no doubt the country's thirsty for change. Of course they are, because they've voted for it. We've proposed a manifesto that sets out what we want to do for the country and deliver that change, and that is the biggest challenge, is to deliver change. But there's two things. I mean, the Prime Minister said this a number of times and has drilled it into us as members of the Cabinet, that change is about resetting the relationships that we've had across the country, particularly in this context with the Scottish Government. The Prime Minister and First Minister had a very, very productive meeting on Sunday, which I attended with the Deputy First Minister, about resetting that relationship. But it's also about doing politics differently, getting away from the yaboo politics of before, respecting Parliament, respecting the devolved administrations, working in partnership early, having communication lines open, working with the public, working in partnership with businesses and organisations. It's a different politics. It will take time for cultures to change in terms of that different politics, but that's the only way we're going to be able to deliver what we want to deliver, and the whole country should be a part of that.
So no court battles with the Scottish Government, no vetoes of Scottish Parliament legislation?
Well, the key thing in those kinds of areas is to talk early. And what we're determined to do is to make sure that people are involved in decision making. The people can pick up the telephone and have conversations about things that might be difficult.
Directly between the First Minister and the Prime Minister?
And the Prime Minister made that very clear, between myself and the Deputy First Minister, between Cabinet members and their opposite numbers in Scotland. In fact, there's been many discussions happened already which have been very well received, both by the civil service and by the office holders in those political positions. So it's about having that mutual respect, listening to each other, going through what wants to be done, and of course, to deliver our missions, to deliver the highest sustained growth in the G7, to deliver GB energy and clean energy by 2030 as two big examples that affect Scotland, requires people to work together, and that requires a new politics, and the Prime Minister is determined to bring integrity, credibility and honesty back to political life. Some
of your Cabinet colleagues have come into their roles and declared that aspects of the British state are broken, the NHS in England, prisons in England. Is the relationship between the UK government and the Scottish government broken?
Well, I think it might have been broken. I think all sides would have admitted that, but now I think it's been repaired. Keir Starmer gave a commitment during the election campaign that his first visit would be to Scotland. He fulfilled that on Sunday. They had some very, very productive discussions with the First Minister. They both listened and talked and said that this was the start of the relationship, not the end. They have the same agenda in terms of wanting to deliver for the Scottish people. So that's really, really important to see that through now. And I hope that, given where we are, given the electoral maths, and given what we want to deliver, which is hugely ambitious for the whole country, and if you remember that the Chancellor, who is now the Chancellor, has set out that economic growth's got to be for all 4 corners of the UK, and within Scotland, all 4 corners of Scotland, then everyone's got to play their role in that. And I think the public would look very dimly on politicians at this stage who decided they didn't want to play ball and they didn't want to make sure that things could be delivered.
Well, since we're on the economy, I want to talk about money. The last Labour government increased the block grant to Scotland every single year. It ended up in real terms, not quite double what it was at the start of that Labour government. Since then, it's basically been flat, and I believe Labour plans are to add £300 million to that block grant. It's not quite a drop in the ocean, it's a drop in the bucket, isn't it?
Well, the manifesto sets out already £340 million of Barnett consequentials from our manifesto commitments. Obviously, that's all the start, because this is the first steps that we can take towards fulfilling our manifesto. It's realistic in terms of the economic conditions. I think it's really important to lay out, and I think the public get this, and they did get it during the election campaign, that this government is inheriting the worst economic circumstances of any incoming government in peacetime, and therefore that does have its challenges, and we would like to do an awful lot more, an awful lot sooner, but we're going to have to be cognizant of the fact the economic situation is difficult.
You're in the unique position of having another election in 2 years to the Scottish Parliament that you very much want Labour to win. You're going to have to loosen the purse strings to show people in Scotland that having a Labour government at Westminster and at Holyrood is worthwhile.
Well, it's about spending, but it's also about reform. And if you look at the big reforms that have already been proposed in terms of setting up GB Energy headquartered in Scotland, creating jobs, clean energy by 2030, lowering bills, these are things that can be done without significant additional spending. There's regulatory reform that can be done as well. And we've been quite clear and set out that, you know, the only way to prosperity for our communities and for individuals is through economic growth. That's why there's a single laser-like focus on economic growth. And that means that we can get more prosperous communities, more prosperous individuals, but also that's how you then generate the money to invest in our public services. So if we're singly laser-like on economic growth, which is the only route out of the problems this country has, and even if we had just grown by the average of the OECD over the last 14 years, we would have had £150 billion more into the economy and £50 billion more into public services. So that is the challenge. We know that's what happens when you don't grow your economy. If we can grow the economy in the way that we ambitiously want to do so, and we've set out some big announcements already this weekend in the last few days since we came into government, then that's what generates the money to make our communities more prosperous and make our public services better funded.
A big part of Scotland's economy is Grangemouth. The government has said it wants to try and save the jobs at Grangemouth. Have you picked up the phone to INEOS? Have any of your cabinet colleagues done that?
Well, this has been number one on the agenda since I walked through the front door of Dover House here on Friday evening. My first meeting on Saturday morning was a briefing on Grangemouth. We've been working with the Scottish Government, with the company itself and with the trade unions since then.
So you have spoken to INEOS?
And we have, there's communications been happening between the Government and INEOS, and I'm confident that there might be a way forward fairly shortly. But the key thing here for Grangemouth isn't just the immediate problems. Grangemouth is the hub for what we want to try and do in terms of just transition, so it's a key part of the ACON carbon capture and storage project. It has the skills and the expertise already, very much in the same arguments as the oil and gas sector for transitioning across to renewables. So what we want Grangemouth to be able to say, and what we want to be able to say to Grangemouth, is we have a plan for a brighter future, a sustainable future into the longer term that takes into account the fact that we want to transition away from fossil fuels to clean energy by 2030 and everything that entails. So we want the future for Grangemouth to be an exciting prospect for jobs and for the economy, but of course there's big challenges in the short term.
And finally, Secretary of State, there might be a situation where in the next few weeks, months perhaps, there's a vote on which UK government policy differs from Scottish Labour policy. If there is such a vote on, say, recognising Palestinian statehood, abolishing the cap, the two-child cap on benefits, do you expect Scottish Labour MPs to vote with the government or the way that the Scottish Party expects them to?
Well, the Scottish Labour MPs that are here at Westminster want to do what's in our manifesto. Our manifesto sets out quite clearly our position on those kinds of issues that you've laid out. It's also about trying to deliver on those issues. So the two-child cap, as an example, will have a full review of universal credit. We'll have a full plan anti-poverty strategy, which will be launched fairly shortly. And we're all focused on making sure that the economy can grow to generate the revenues that allow us to do the things that we want to do. I think it would be dishonest to say to the public that we can do all the things that is on that list that you've given without realising the situation that we're currently in as a country. And I think we have to be honest with the public. And the Prime Minister said, look, we want credibility, we want integrity, but we mainly want honesty back into our politics. So the honest thing to say is that we will do things that we want to do, but we'll have to do them when the money's available.
Scottish Secretary Ian Murray, thank you very much.